setting up something called Secure Shell, or SSH. So let's go ahead and go into switch 1. We're going to run through this process to configure secure access to the switch using SSH and not telnet. So config T for configure terminal. The first thing that has to happen whenever you're setting up SSH on a device is you have to change the host name of the device. We've already done that. We did that yesterday. The host name of our device is SW1. So we don't have to do that now. We had to do that before. All right? And then we're going to go ahead and set our domain name. The domain name has to be set. It just does not have to be set to an active domain. In other words, it doesn't have to be a real domain or a reachable domain or registered domain, but it does have to be set up. And the reason being is that the RSA certificate that we're going to be generating, which is a self-signed certificate, uses the host name and the domain name to establish that certificate identity. All right? So you have to have a domain name set. Doesn't matter what you set it to, it just needs to be set.
If you're working on a device that it's being used, how do you see what that domain name is? If it's not
show run.
Does it show up in there?
Yeah, it'll show up as one of the configs.
Okay.
If I do a show run here, you'll see it listed right there, IP domain name.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The next step is to generate your self-signed RSA certificate. RSA is part of PKI, Public Key Infrastructure, and it's a way for us to do asynchronous authentication and key generation using a digital certificate. And you can actually use signed certificates, but there's a whole bunch of other configurations you have to complete in order to use signed certificates. We're just going to go ahead and use a self-signed certificate, meaning that it can't really be authenticated, but it can be used to establish our bulk encryption process. We'll learn a lot more about the encryption stuff and certificates and whatnot on the weekend session.
Now, are these commands for setting it up new, or if it's being used but you just want to disable telnet and put SSH on it, still need to do
Same
this?
thing, yeah, same process. Crypto key generate, RSA, and we're going to go ahead and set up a key length of 2048. That is the minimum recommendation. NIST standards say use a key length of at least 2048. You could actually go larger than that, but that's not necessary. You have to have at least 768 to run SSH version 2, which is going to give you the ability to run AES 256. But the 2048 is generally going to be acceptable. All right. Now you'll notice as soon as I do that, I can see that SSH is enabled on the platform, but it's SSH version 1.99. In Cisco's world, that means it's not version 2. All right. What about 1024? Yeah, Giovanni, government standards here in the United States have identified, and most banks around the world have identified, a key length of 1024 is no longer being adequately secure. The minimum key size should be 2048 bits.
How did you get that?
Enter.
Oh, just enter.
Okay. So when you see SSH 1.99 in Cisco speak, that simply means not 2.0. We're going to go ahead and set up SSH version 2 because we want to be able to use AES 256 to connect to our platform. So we simply execute the command IPSSH version 2. Now, had I not generated a key greater than 768 bits, I would not be able to run SSH version 2. But because I generated a key of 2048, I can run SSH version 2.
So is that already loaded in the iOS? You just more or less have to tell it to start using it?
Yes. Yes. It is supported as part of the iOS. Well, if the iOS supports cryptographic features, some iOS images don't, but yeah. All right. So we've essentially enabled SSH on our platform. Now the only thing left to do is to go ahead and enable SSH on our VTY lines. All right. And you can see the configuration in your book here. You have to go into line VTY 04. What does the 04 represent? Why 04? Why not just line VTY 0? Any ideas?
You know, I see it every day, but I don't know why.
It's the range. All right? It's the range of SSH or virtual terminal lines, 0 through 4. We're actually configuring 5 VTY lines. All right? It could be 015, could be 032, 031, whatever. It just depends on the platform. By default, all Cisco platforms support at least 5 VTY sessions.
Then why would you have two, if you had it, two entries, or VTY 04 and VTY 015?
You wouldn't have 04 and 015. You would have, I'll show you. You would have 04 and 515, but not 04, 015, right? Because some platforms support more than 5 simultaneous sessions. This particular platform does, right? See line VTY 04 and 515. That just means that this particular platform has 16 virtual terminal lines. You can go even higher than that. In fact, I can see how many this platform supports by doing line VTY 0 question mark. This particular platform only supports 16. Some platforms support hundreds, depending on the platform. But the reason they're separated is because these are optional lines, 5 through 15. You can delete those, but you can never delete the first 5. The first 5 are always there. All right, so 04 means 0 through 4, which is 5. Okay? It doesn't make sense to configure these virtual terminal lines differently because you cannot control which virtual terminal line you're going to access when you're connecting to the device. There's no way to tell the device which virtual terminal line you want to connect to. So you're better off just configuring them all at once. We're going to do no password because we want to remove the password from our virtual terminal lines. All right, that's not part of the book there, but there's no reason to have a password set on the VTY lines if you're using SSH. We're going to do transport input SSH. Now, what did that command do? Essentially, by executing the command transport input SSH, what I've done is I've disabled Telnet and I've enabled only SSH on these VTY lines. Now you could do both. You could say transport input Telnet SSH. It doesn't work in Packet Tracer, but you could do that. Try that again. You could do that where you're allowing both protocols. You could do a transport input all, which would allow all protocols. Or if you do transport input SSH, you're only allowing the SSH protocol. All right? Which is effectively disabling Telnet. Telnet connections to this platform are no longer allowed. Now, the last command that we're going to execute under the VTY lines is very important. because we need to tell the individuals that are connecting to these VTY lines how they're supposed to authenticate. We do login local. Very important command, not just login. See, login only means that you're required to put in a password. SSH requires the use of a username and a password. So when you see login local, what it's saying is that you're required to authenticate using a username and a password. All right. Now the last step is to go ahead and set up our username and password. I'm going to go back to global configuration mode because usernames are set up in global configuration mode. I'm going to put username Cisco, secret Cisco. Obviously, you're going to want to use something a little bit more secure than that in the real world, but we're going to go ahead and keep our stuff at Cisco for now. All right. Back to global config mode. Username Cisco, secret Cisco. All right. This is called a local username database. When we say login local, what it's referring to is it's referring to this list of usernames. And you can have multiple usernames. You can have Cisco 2, secret Cisco. You can have username Cisco 3, secret Cisco. So you can have multiple users in this platform that are allowed to authenticate.
So when you do the username, you know, whatever you're going to put in there, username here, we put username Cisco, secret Cisco.
Yep.
Is that just for local access if you console in or?
This is for authenticating with SSH. That has nothing to do with the console because we're not doing any kind of local authentication on our console port. You could go into config T, line con 0 and say login local. So now when I connect to the console port, I'm also going to use the same username list to authenticate to the console. But it's not SSH, right? The console is RS-232.
Just trying to figure that out because on all our devices that, well, they take telnet off, you know.
Right.
And it's SSH, but you authenticate through.
Probably.
Well, if you use PuTTY, then yeah, you have to put in what you're using, your username and TACACS password.
Yeah, well, that's AAA. That's a
So
completely
you have to
different
actually-
thing.
Okay, so if you don't put AAA on it, then it's what this says.
Yes.
Okay.
You can do authentication with a TACACS server or a Radius server.
Right.
We're going to talk about that in the security portion of the class. That's kind of beyond the scope of this.
Just
But
wanted to make sure when you would use these.
login local means authenticate using the username lists in the router itself or the switch itself. All right? Okay. We're done with SSH. Now we just have to test it. So we're going to go ahead and assign some IP addresses to our PCs so that we can verify SSH operations. Go back to your Cisco Packet Tracer desktop. Click on the PC. All right. And we're going to go to the desktop tab and we're going to go to IP configuration. Let's go ahead and assign an address to the left computer of 10.10. We don't need a gateway because we don't have multiple subnets here. Okay. Oops. 255.255.255.0. And for the PC on the right, we're going to assign an address of 10.11. 192.168.10.11, 255.255.255.0.
Where are you getting to that interface?
Click on the computer, click on desktop tab, click on IP configuration. PC on the left is 10.10, the PC on the right is 10.11. it.